So you've heard me post about this before. I think that one of the unique features of midlife is just its messiness. That's really what it is. It's a mess, right? I mean, can we all agree? Like you're in the midst of it. There's no way to get out of it. There's a lot of change happening all at the same time, and it just gets messy, right? The other day, I was finally going through four-ish, two-ish, three-ish. I can't remember how many boxes did I do, but a few of the boxes that are the last vestige of my parents' estates or estates, I should say. They both had a home here in Minnesota shortly before they passed. Almost 20 years ago. We're going on like 17 years, I think, this fall. So it's been a minute that they've been gone. And there was a 4,000 square foot house at one point. There was a lot of stuff. We all divvied it up. But I, being the resident that was still living in Minnesota, got left with a lot of that stuff. I don't know if you've been in this situation. It was a ways back, right? While back. And I still have boxes that I have not gone through. But I have brought them just dutifully through to several moves since then. And the place that I'm in now is the place that I've downsized the most in. And so I didn't have a lot of space. So I really did go through a lot of it. But there are, I don't know, 10, 12 of these boxes still. At least four of those are all pictures. And so what are you going to do with that? We're going to have to eventually put a little nest egg away and have somebody put it on a flash drive or something for our family, or upload it to the cloud so that we have access to the pictures, but I don't have to carry the boxes around anymore. But there are still some boxes that just had things, and I wasn't really sure what was in there. Like one of the boxes that I went through said funeral on it, and I was like, it's not the box you go through first. Sometimes it takes about 20 years before you want to go through that box. I say all of this to tell you that I went through this box, and I was able to throw out some stuff, put some stuff away, organize some stuff that I needed to keep, and make space for myself. But it was messy. It was a messy box, like messy because the dang thing had been sitting in garages for ages. And so there might have been some mouse turds in there. I'm not going to lie, but messy. And there was stuff from a funeral in there. There was an entire photo album in there, which I think that we actually put out at a funeral, but it wasn't in with the other photo albums, which I've had unpacked and on a shelf for ages for my kids to look through if they want to look at old family photos with me. There were, parts of my divorce from my first husband, which is now well over 20 years ago. I thought I had all that stuff in that other drawer in the file. Nope. Here was an entire package of that. It was weird stuff, receipts, this just weird mess. Had to go through it, had to unpack it so that I could reorganize it, right? And it got me to thinking about the guest that I'm pulling on today. She is a coach that helps people to unpack messy parts of their life in order to organize yourself and embrace and empower yourself in this next phase of your life. Her name is Shawn Carney, and we're going to talk today about how, just like these boxes I've just described, sometimes midlife is just messy. That's what it is. It's just like opening a box that has a little of this and a little of that and some of this stuff. Like so many aspects of our life is changing all at the same time, just because, there are a lot of endings at this point. A lot of changes job-wise, a lot of changes in our family life, a lot of changes in our personal life. And we may be reckoning with things like spiritually and what's my life's purpose. And there's just a lot going on in these couple boxes, people, and you might want a little bit of an assistant, a mentor, somebody who has been through it and can guide you with it. And that's what Shawn and I are talking about today. So keep listening.
I know your deep, dark secret. You don't like your life. You're a woman in midlife, and for the past 2 decades or more, you've poured yourself in to other people. You've poured yourself into your career, your family, and yet on the inside, you feel broken. And that's no way to be. I'm Dr. Natalie Marr. I'm a clinical psychologist and a life transition expert. It wasn't too long ago that I was in your shoes. waking up in my early 40s thinking I've got 2 failed marriages and I'm a single mom for the second time in my life. And I just knew that I could do better, that I could feel better. Fortunately for you, I have about 20 years experience clinically. And so I've created a method that will help you learn to love your story. I know that the story that you're telling yourself about your life feels awful. And I know that you think that you can't change that. I assure you, you can. And when we work together, I'm gonna help you to craft a different story, a story that you love, a story that makes you want to get up every single day. Let's work together to help you love your story.
Welcome. So today's guest is Shawn Carney, and I wanted to give you a little bit of her bio before we introduce you to her. Shawn is a coactive trained coach who helps people go from feeling stuck and overwhelmed by life's messy transitions to embracing change with confidence and clarity. Prior to her career shift into coaching, she worked for over 2 decades as a senior leader in technology for companies such as Etsy, Spotify, Universal Music Group, and EMI Music. She's spoken at conferences across 3 countries, contributed to many podcasts, and participated in panel discussions on topics of technology, inclusion, leadership, and operations. Through her work, she blends empathy, intuition, and a passion for inclusion to create spaces where deep connections and transformative change can flourish. So let's meet Shawn. Well, welcome back, everybody, to Midlife Crisis, to a Centered Life Thriving. I have with us today a really great guest, Shawn Carney, and she is going to be helping us in our empowered living as midlife women. And without further ado, let's just get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, Shawn?
Yeah, and I love this question, by the way, because it's so simple, but it's also just so nuanced, right? I was thinking about this because you so generously provided a few of the questions you were going to ask me ahead of time, which I really liked. And, you know, we identify with our work so much. We get attached to this work identity. It's the thing that we ask people when we go and meet them for the first time. Oh, what do you do? Right. And then it's no wonder that we struggle so much with the question of who am I when I'm no longer doing that work?
Exactly.
Right. What is my value even? So I've spent a lot of time this year thinking about this. And so I'll start the story at the beginning and then now we've got a callback.
I like it. Let's start with the beginning.
So maybe the most important thing to kind of start with is we moved a lot when I was a kid. And there was no real reason for that. We just moved every 2 years or so to within like an hour of where we'd been. So it wasn't super exciting either. My hypothesis is that my dad had a problem with authority and ended up having to move to he was a teacher and had to move to different school districts a lot. So that's what I think was going on, but he's not with us anymore, so I can't ask him that question.
Can't verify. But hey, then we could just go with that story.
Exactly.
No one to dispute it either, so yeah.
That's right. And it's interesting because I'm really an introvert. And so I think that what that did was it allowed me to learn how to, it kind of forced me, but also allowed me to learn how to meet new people and how to be pretty resilient in new situations. And maybe even gave me a little bit of the travel bug as well to go and explore new things. So by the time I'd finished school, the last thing I wanted to do was jump right into 4 more years of school. And so what I ended up doing is waiting tables and bartending. I played in some bands, and the ability doing that gave me the ability to go travel. And so, fun fact, I've been to every state in the U.S. I've been to around the world as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, pretty exciting. The global stuff happened later, but I spent my late teens and early 20s just traveling around the country and exploring. I had a pickup truck. I put a camper shell in the back with a futon mattress in there.
Love it.
And it was van life, like 30 years before van life was this
like trendy.
coveted lifestyle. Yeah, trendy.
Exactly.
Yep. For a period there towards the end, I had a cat, and my cat was in the van with me. It was, in the truck with me. It was pretty awesome. But eventually I figured out, I probably need health insurance. This is probably something I should get. And back then, at least, you required a job to do that. So I settled down. I got an office job. I had some incredible mentors early in my career, which really helped give me a leg up because I hadn't gone to college. I didn't really have any skills. And ended up working in the music industry for record companies. And the head of IT at this particular record company took me under his wing, taught me everything I know. Maybe not everything, but he put me on track to learn everything that I know. Spent a lot of time out in LA working in record labels, took a little detour out to Hawaii for a year, and then ended up in New York running the IT department. I went back to college. I am a painter, an illustrator, an aspiring potter. So my degree is
and you worked in IT? I'm like, I love this though. Like, right brain, left brain, like, really nice little integration for you.
And that's what I loved about it was it really gave me that holistic kind of flexed all the curiosity on both sides of my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. That's unique.
Amazing. Yeah. And so I did this, and I got into technology leadership, and for like 20 years, this is what I was doing. And it was really rewarding. But the part of it that I loved the most wasn't the technology. It was the empowering other people, right? Whether it was building strong teams or leading with empathy or creating inclusive environments, that's what really fulfilled me.
Right.
And I would say that by the time I figured that out and really connected to it, I realized that what I loved the most was helping people move through kind of messy transitions. Whether it was getting promoted into a new role or embracing a new project or dealing with, things not going as in the way you want it to, because that's a pretty a constant in our life is we have expectations and they don't always work out.
No, they do not.
And to fast forward to through my life where I've lost a number of people who really mattered deeply to me, right? That detour in Hawaii that I talked about was to help my partner at the time. Her father was ending his life. He'd just been given a terminal diagnosis with cancer. And so we went to Hawaii and basically every day was, what do you want to do today? If today's the last day you have, how do we spend it?
What a beautiful thing that you guys gave
swimming
yourselves and him. Yes.
It was a gift he gave us too, to actually pause our life and allow us this moment to just really be present. So it woke some things up for me that I didn't know what to do with for a long time. And then my grandmother passed, who was practically raised me, loved her. My brother died of a heroin overdose. My father, who I was estranged from most of my life, passed. And I tell you all of this because all of these were these big moments in my life where I was kind of getting in touch with what matters. And each time something would happen, it would kind of refocus to what really matters in this world. And then compound that with a layoff that happened just before the holidays. Those 20 years. And suddenly I find myself in my mid-50s at a pinnacle, in a pinnacle role in my career. Not very many of those roles exist.
Right.
In a really tough job market and trying to find someone to hire me who doesn't think I'm overqualified or underqualified.
Ish and yes.
Yes. So it was this moment, this culmination.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I was in midlife. I was searching for meaning. And I thought, I've always wanted to be a coach. I thought it was something I would do when I retired. why not do it now?
Yeah. Yeah. The universe might have created that space because I guess you needed to do it sooner than that, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was just like all of these things falling into place and helping me realize that this is what my purpose was and this is where I am at this moment.
Right.
And that's kind of the foundation of my coaching practice is helping folks, mostly from marginalized groups, to move through life's messy transitions and work in systems that aren't always designed for us to succeed within.
Right. I mean, I don't know if I've met a system designed for me. I'm going to be honest. I mean, and I'm unique, so that would be hard to do. But like most of the systems, I think that they're set in place in such a way that they kind of help you, but also are frustrating to you. Yes. Just so that my podcasters know, before we started recording today, I was a little late getting on because not one, but two of my devices that I need to convert my mic to the computer, just gone, just not in the places where I always put them. So I'm like flustered and freaking out. And Shawn was sharing, technology is kind of like that. It's like both built to like, break down and get lost for some reason. Like why does it need to be this big, this little converter? So you need this unique spot for it. So I don't think that the world is designed to take us on. So then what do we have but to take that on, right? And you are uniquely qualified. Thank you so much, by the way, for sharing your story with us. I know that it will resonate with so many women. And, you know, there is a confluence of things that are happening in midlife because there are endings. They're coming, right? Yes. I mean, you were talking about, you know, lives lost, people that were really significant to you. And, you know, those will be some of those endings, but some of those endings are things like jobs. Some of those endings are just things like, you know, I lived nomadically for a while and then I didn't. And, you know, like, so it changed. Death and change. Like, these are the things that we have to wrestle with, and change we have to wrestle with through the entirety of us being here. So so wonderful. And I do love the way that you frame that. Like, I help people through the messiness, because that's just really what it is. It's like there's no manual here. Haha. You're gonna have to do this. And connection and having somebody guide you is so essential to that. Humans don't human in isolation. When we are in isolation, there's all sorts of disorders I could go through, you know, starting in infancy, called failure to thrive, that start to happen because we're not neurobiologically, anatomically meant to not be with others and being helped along by others. So so your job is well-meaninged and well aligned, I think, at this time. My question is usually like, what got you in this to empower women in midlife? You have a bigger, broader group of people, but there really is, you said you know, like to work with folks that are kind of on the fringes, that are in those marginalized groups, right? Might not have as many coaches aligned with what their needs are. Tell me about that. What made you want to empower that group of people? Yeah,
I mean, part of it is my own life experiences, right, of being marginalized in tech, in the music industry, as a woman, as a queer woman. I don't want to get too in the weeds of this, but there's this concept of intersectionality, which really is all these different identities that I have, or that you have, or that each of us have.
Yes.
And some of them have more privilege than others have.
Correct.
So like, as a white person, I have a lot of privilege. As a queer person, I have less privilege. As a woman, I have less privilege. As a gender nonconforming or non-binary person, I have even less privilege, right? And so these things are all tensions that play in each other. And this ties back to those systems that weren't designed for us, right? Most systems are designed for the majorities, and the majority is tended to be cis, straight, white men for the most part. Or variations around that. And
heteronormative.
Exactly. I know what it feels like to be on the outside of that. I know, even in a leadership role, I know what that feels like, to like struggle within those systems and try to change those systems from within too. And I know what it feels like to find success and satisfaction and happiness anyway within that. And
which is, I mean, that's the secret sauce when you're helping people through that mess is, I've seen it happen. I know how to make this work, even when you're sitting in those spaces.
It doesn't always feel possible, but it is. It's possible. Yeah. And so that's what led me where I am, and with I think the mission that I have is wanting to give people those same tools, that same support, that lift to like break free of whatever limiting beliefs that they have. And, you know, make those systems work for them and create a life that really reflects who they are and what's meaningful for them. And, you know, when the world tells us that we don't belong, it's a hard message to hear. And it can be really helpful to have someone else standing next to you and behind you to say, like, but you do.
But yes.
You do. And you can take it.
There's an intersectionality to your coaching in that way too, then, because you're leveraging lived experience on your own part so that you can hold hope where other people can't hold it for themselves, which I find to be one of the most powerful things that any of the healing arts does, right? It's like, okay, I understand that internally you've come to the end of what you can do, and so you're externally having me connect to you, and I will perform some of those things on your behalf until you can co-regulate with me and learn to do them on your own. Yeah,
that championing, acknowledging and championing, it can be exhausting moving through this world. And having someone lend you some of their energy to, you know, lift you when you need a little bit of that. Really meaningful.
Really meaningful.
Frankly, and I feel lucky that I had that in my life too. Those mentors that I talked about, like cheerleaders in my life. That's so helpful.
So helpful. So key to moving on, which it makes sense in my mind then that somewhere in there was that little nugget that was growing of maybe when I retire, I'll do this thing where I mentor other people, because it was such a significant part of your own journey, such a positive, significant, like a generative part of your journey that you would want to, you know, make meaning in your life and give back and align with that purpose on the other side. It just totally makes sense to me. What are some of the challenges that you see most commonly in the work that you're doing with folks?
I think such a great question, because there's so many things that we have in common. You know, we live in such a divisive world right now, but there's so much more that we have in common when we just stop to kind of reflect and look at that. And a lot of times the challenges that we have are one of those things. So overcoming that internalized doubt, that imposter syndrome, right? The belief that maybe you're not enough. I think society tells us directly and indirectly that, like, we're not worthy, whether it's of our career path or success or our dreams, the promotion that we want, finding success or happiness. And that internalized message can lead to a lot of fear and a lot of hesitation when thinking about going for something or making a change. So that's one thing. Another thing is, and I keep kind of talking about these systems that weren't designed for us, right? But it's important because we often think it must be me. It must be something I'm doing wrong. I didn't do enough. I wasn't good enough. Something along that narrative. But often it's that the system is actively working against you. And so you have to work twice as hard as, you know, you think you need to in order to even start to find success within that space. And so it's an important message, and it's a big challenge that people face, but it's an important message to remind them of, to get it away from it must be me, that feeling.
Well, and neurobiologically, we're wired to be more responsive to that network, that fear-based network.
Yes.
Has been a learning, an integral learning component. Like out on the savannah, you want to run when you hear rustling. There was a reason adaptively that became the stronger learning component than, say, trying to align with purpose or feeling contented or blissful about something is not as strong a motivator or driver of our learning as fear. There are a lot of huge systems that are built upon that premise. I'm sorry to say, I'm not an anti, capitalist by any stretch of the imagination, because I'm an entrepreneur, but there is a feature of capitalism that is premised on you as you are aren't enough and will have to go out and get things to be enough, to have enoughness. And then there are populations, right, like you're talking about, that are marginalized, which I'd put women in midlife smack into, because your social currency is tanking because you have wrinkles and you're not young, and youth is beauty, and you're not as, your body looks different, and fit is beauty. And there's all sorts of things that start to really mess with us. Our energy levels aren't there. We're more irritable biologically, and if you can't play nice as a woman, there's cultural currency that falls off with that. So there's all sorts of reasons why the systems are not set in a way that are helpful to us. I think it's really great to have guides in that, though, because what you're describing of, and then people go back and say, what did I do wrong, is such a heavily programmed response that is backed by that neurobiology. It's like, if something doesn't feel right out here, what's the one thing that I can fix here? Right? So we just naturally go back to, could I have done something differently? What could I have done differently? I must have done something wrong. And yet, you do that for decades, and you're like, maybe it is not just me. Let me think about this for a second. Yep. So how do you advise people in that journey? I mean, clearly you're helping them to kind of look on the outside, but are there other tools, other things that you use or suggest for folks?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is reconnecting with your own strengths, recognizing the barriers for what they are as external to you, but understanding like what's within your locus of control and what you have influence over, right? There's things that you can things you can control, things you can influence, and things you're going to have to decide if they're worth tolerating or not, and then make an active choice if they're not, to take a different path.
Right.
I think a lot of people get on autopilot, and they think that they have less control than they have, and they just start to accept what's happening to them. So really getting aligned with your own values, understanding what those are. Understanding what might be values that someone else has put on you, expectations from family or society. And figuring out where that dissonance is with your own values. And then taking small steps towards that resonance with your own value structure instead. And this sounds very, theoretical. So an easy way to kind of do this that I work with people on is, what was a really impactful moment in your life? Something that felt really meaningful and where you felt full of love and joy and satisfaction. Like, bring that memory up. Who was with you? Where were you? What were you doing? What did it feel like in your body? What did it taste like and smell like? Was there music playing? Right? Like, trigger that,
really get in it, like a re-experiencing.
Embody it. And then what values are we getting out of that? What was it that mattered about that moment for you? And then you can then kind of pivot into a little bit of a visioning exercise of what would you like to see, and how does that align to those values we just talked about, and really just starting to show people what actually matters to you, and where in a way you can feel it, and then tying it to a directional kind of a space of where you might be going within that.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I think so many of those tools are very powerful. Embodiment is a huge and very powerful tool because we can get into too much thinking about it.
Oh yeah. It's so easy to come up here.
Totally, totally. It's actually a nice escape from that fear-based thinking or fear-based drive that we were just referring to. So if you're in fight or flight or feeling like in survival mode in your workplace, in your home life, and in any aspect of your life, God, it's kind of nice to go, let me figure this out. Let me think about it for a while. It's almost an escape from that emotionality. But the way that you're using it is, you're helping them envision parts of their life that people would want to re-experience, right? We don't want to necessarily flee from them. But then you want to bring on that thinking brain because you also want them to be compassionately self-aware that, like, so what's the value there? What's driving you in that moment? And then how do you take that information and apply it here in this mess that we're helping you unpack and navigate through? I love that. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. So what advice would you give a woman in midlife, would you say? I mean, if it's the mess of midlife that approaches you as a coach, do you have any thoughts about what she could do here?
Yeah, as someone in midlife myself, right? Midlife is a really powerful time. And I think the biggest thing that was impactful for me, and right, your mileage may vary and everyone's unique, but that understanding that life is too short to live by someone else's rules. And so this goes back to what matters to me versus what matters to other people. So reconnect with who you are, whether that's what matters to you, what your passions are, what brings you joy. And that could look very different today than it did 20 or 30 years ago. Yeah. So don't make assumptions, like dig in there and figure that out, explore and try new things. Let go of what society expects of us. Let go of the idea that you have to fit into this mold. There's a double-edged sword here. That up until this point in our lives, society has really expected us to conform to specific roles where our value, as you were saying, was around youth, beauty, caregiving, maybe for some folks, motherhood or being a wife. Yes. But as you start to reach midlife, those expectations begin to shift. Yes. And we start to feel discarded and overlooked, undervalued because, again, that message that we're hearing is your best years are behind you. You're wrinkled, you're sagging, you're forgetting words, you're those hot flashes, I don't find you attractive. And you know what I mean? Like all those things society is saying to us. Yeah. And it's all rooted in outdated beliefs. And those beliefs equate a woman's worth with her appearance, her fertility, her ability to care for others, right? Yep. And so that double-edged sword is like, okay, well, if society is saying that I don't have, like, that's not my value anymore, get to decide what is.
Exactly. This is my favorite part.
Right? It's so liberating. Like, you escape all of that. The cage has been lifted, and you're just running around now, and you get to choose the path that feels fulfilling to you. Yes. Your self-worth isn't tied to external validation. It can get rooted in your experience, your wisdom, your compassion, your inner strength. So if you can get rid of those limiting beliefs, and that's a journey in itself, is to sort through those, right? It's not just like let me just take that off and throw it on the floor.
I'd say it's not just a journey. It is the journey. It is a mindset shift. And so one of the things that I remind coaching clients, clinical clients, people on my podcast, anybody that wants to hear me say it is, you're never going to get rid of that old programming. It'll be there somewhere, right? Yeah. The idea is, could we get it to be quieter, and that when we notice it, we can just kind of look past it quicker, right? Instead of letting it drive like, oh no, this is truth, and drive where we're at. Because you're never going to make those old reels, old tapes, to date myself, go away. You can't. Yeah. They're there somewhere back there. And you're going to reprogram how you look at things. And so that, I mean, it's an entire mindset shift. That's the journey to me.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I agree. I agree completely. There's a volume knob that we need to learn to turn down. Yes. And it starts by acknowledging it and just, sitting with it. And there's actually an exercise that can be really helpful here too. Look at both those challenging moments, but also the high points. It's a journey lines mapping. And it can be really helpful for folks who are moving through transitions. So you take like 15 or 20 minutes, you map out in your life, what are the high points and the low points? And this is like a linear timeline here. And these could be milestones like graduating or your first job or, a massive success that you had or a major loss that you had or a big pivot that you had to make. And then you ask yourself questions. You look at this now, this journey of your life, and you ask yourself questions like, what emotions did this bring up for you?
Yep.
Right? How did these experiences shape your beliefs, your values, your expectations in life, right? Maybe this is where you start to notice like, oh, this is how I became so resilient, or this is why I'm, I have so much empathy.
Yeah.
And that helps you to start to see those strengths and those skills, right? Which is what's going to help you to start to turn that volume knob down on some of these other things.
Right.
And you can also ask yourself, like, what life lessons did I learn as a result of this? Like, if I went through a lot of loss in my life, like, maybe that's what shaped my ability to be more empathetic with others or to embrace life more fully. And so all of this is really helping you to kind of stop focusing so much on the limiting beliefs and start to kind of look at the expansiveness of what you're actually capable of.
Exactly. Well, you become more expansive, the bigger picture kind of thinking that you're, exploring in that exercise. But I really like that because you had talked about using visualization in that positive sense of going back to those, moments in our life that we're embodying our values to help us kind of touch base with our values. But that also looked at high and low points. So you're also going to see the core wound to get psychologists like on you. What's the core wound that drove I'm not good enough or, I have to hustle for my worthiness, which could be a belief system that you developed in those, earlier stages of your life. And having that awareness, I'm big on awareness. So I'm happy to hear that be a through line with your stuff as well. I just think compassionately staying aware of why we are where we are when we're here, what drove us to do things one way, and how to then shift that motivation because time has shifted and we are different. And so we get to choose. I love that. I think that is empowerment, right? Is when we can finally say that programming didn't even come from me. That was not of me. I don't need to believe it anymore. I can release that. And I'm going to believe this over here in midlife.
Yeah.
For my listeners to know, I met Shawn because I was a guest on her podcast. And one of the questions she gave me towards the end, she had asked me, like, do we have anything to look forward to after menopause? Like, does it get better? Because I was talking about a lot of the things that are changing during perimenopausal phase as our hormones are adjusting. And there's lots of literature, actually, that it says it's a little bit of a promised land on the other side when it restabilizes and your brain has done all of that neural pruning and you're just in a different mindset and your purpose is much different. And the grandmother's hypothesis is, an old hunter-gatherer, you needed to be a leader. There were hunters that went out hunting, but they didn't always bring back a hunt and they were gone a lot. And there were, childbearing mothers and young children that needed to be cared for. And that was the role of the grandmothers, is to use this wisdom of their lifetime, postmenopausally to run the show back there, to gather if things needed to get gathered so people could get fed, to, child rear when other women needed a break from child rearing, all the things, right? That's versatility, collaboration, their power structure being working with and giving power to, rather than working over, rather than what we're naturally inclined to believe is power, which is a power over model that's patriarchal. It's a matriarchal model of power with and power to, but they were leaders. That was their purpose. And we still have that neurobiologically as well. So there is a promised land on the other side. Just to reiterate, that's what my thought was, but I was like, I don't know the science behind that. So of course I went down that rabbit hole after I spoke with you. Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love the callback to my podcast. Too.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast here. And would you share with us where my listeners can find you, Shawn?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is ShawnCarneyCoaching.com, ShawnCarney coaching.com. And you can find me there. If you want to do a complimentary consultation, I'd be happy to spend some time talking about what coaching can do for you, what your goals might be, how to help you live in alignment with your values. I have an Instagram that you can get to from there. There's a podcast that we talked about you can find on the website. It's called Leading Beyond Limits, Cultivating Creativity. And I am working on a talk, actually, that we'll be giving later this year, and probably into next year, that hopefully gets built into a cohort program on moving through transitions at work. And part of this is with all of the layoffs that have been happening in the industries, mostly tech industry, but across lots of different industries, helping people deal with all of the emotions and things that come up, including grief and some of the other harder emotions to deal with. So if you go to my website, you'll find more information about all those things as it becomes available.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Shawn. And I will make sure, listeners, that all of those links are in our notes for today. So you can just go over to the notes and click on those links so that you can see what Shawn's work is, what's coming up. And please participate in that free consultation, because we're all living in a little bit of a mess, and so any little bit can be helpful. And she might, if you feel like some of the things that she said today resonate with you, then we want to make sure that you go over there and get that help as well. Thank you so much, Shawn, for being on Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving.
Thank you so much, Dr. Natalie. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these two crisis resources. They're available to anybody. Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone, text HOME, home, to 741-741. to the crisis text line. You can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.